No problem at all.
Sigurd Larsen is a Berlin-based Danish architect who founded his studio back in 2010. And with work spanning across Europe and across many different functions, Sigurd Larsen has consistently combined the aesthetics of high-quality materials and concepts while focusing on functionality in such complex contexts. And today we will converse about his design approach that I'm sure a lot of people can learn from. So thank you so much, Sigurd, for being here.
Yeah, no problem at all. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So will you first tell us about yourself, your studio, and how it started?
Yeah, well, the studio was founded a little over 10 years ago, and I started it here in Berlin after I lived here only for a little over a year. I'm originally from Denmark, and I studied architecture in Copenhagen, and then after my studies, I moved to Berlin, and shortly after I founded the company here. And the intention back then was to start in a smaller scale and then work up from there, so to speak. So we did a lot of furniture design in the beginning, which slowly qualified us to do some interior work for like hotel rooms and showrooms and other things. And then yeah, we got trusted to do a whole building. The first houses we built were in Denmark, and then yeah, we started building in Germany, and over the years also in France, Austria, Greece, and Switzerland. No, Austria, I think I said already. And most of the things we build now is in Berlin and sort of northern Germany. So it's a bit spread out. And yeah, the scale that we work in is very much around the sort of the smaller scale of architecture. I think our biggest project is 2,000 square meters. And then yeah, we go very much into detail with the projects we do. We very often end up designing the furniture for the house. We help finding the products for the inside. With many projects that we do right now, we also design the exterior space, the garden around the place. Sometimes in collaboration with a gardener or landscape architect, but we try to actually, yeah, not stop designing at the wall, but design everything around as a kind of Gesamtkunstwerk, which I think is a fairly Danish approach. The Danish designers and architects tend to want to do everything from one hand, and yeah, that's something we very much do here, although it's a bit untypical in Germany.
So I guess you can explain about your design approach, but what was the main inspiration behind it?
Well, it's hard for me to say something general about how we design everything, because we actually like very much to let every product be or every project be its own little world. We try to first gather a lot of information about the site where we are. So the way we design a house in Greece is radically different from how we design a house in Germany, for example, although it has exactly the same design brief. But what we need to take into consideration is the building law, the local building law, the input of the local climate conditions in terms of yeah, anything from earthquake to heat to the seasons changing. But also the local knowledge. In some countries, they're very good at working with a certain material and basically don't have craftsmanship available for another kind of material. So right now we're building a hotel on Crete in Greece. And here we were looking into actually working a lot with wood for sustainability reasons and due to the fact that it's an earthquake region. So learning a bit from Japanese architecture. And it turned out that, I mean, there's been people living on that island for thousands of years and they have always built in stone. So why is that? And then it's a part of our learning process to figure out why do they build the way they build on that island? Is it why how do traditions actually emerge? Where do they come from? Because you could say it would maybe be smart to build with wood on that island, but on the other hand, there are many other factors such as salt water and humidity and other things involved. So we try to work our way into all these factors and then let that be the inspiration of the project. So our design process is, I think, very much related to understanding the local culture and having a learning process about that and actually being very open-minded to that. And including that is also the cultural context of the local knowledge. You know, what can they actually do in this local region? So we in the end are able to work with local companies rather than importing Danish carpenters to wherever we build in the world, but rather try to work our way into that context.
That's amazing. So, and then since you earlier mentioned that you started from designing furnitures and smaller scale stuff, how do you bring human scale approach to architecture scale and then even further to landscape or to environmental scale?
Well, I think when we work with mostly private homes or hotels, I find it very easy to kind of live myself into into the situation of being the one living in the house in the future. So I think when we're sitting there with the floor plans, I feel it's quite easy to imagine how it is. Where do you want to sit at what time of the day? Where does the sun sort of move? Where is it in the morning? Where is it in the afternoon? And try to create situations in the house. And therefore, in our floor plans from the beginning on, we actually furnish everything. We draw every detail. We draw every corner of the garden. At what time of the day is it nice to sit, where, and so on. So I think we live ourselves very much into into how it is to be there in the future. And I think a part of that is basically to work with the interior, exterior, all of that at the same time, so you can have it all in your head, and then you're not later on surprised about, oh, but wouldn't it have been nice to do this differently, because actually it's impossible to put furniture into this room. So we think it all together at once, and I think that makes it a bit easier to control the design process in that sense. So I think with the human scale, to me, that's always very much related to the smaller things in the house, the furniture, the things that actually touches your body, the height of them, the dimensions of them. All of that taken into consideration while actually designing the whole house. I don't see that as two different things that are separated from each other.
And then how do you extend, the mindset of functionality as a way of nurturing the natural environment as well?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it's in a way, I don't think it's that complicated. I also like things to be uncomplicated in many ways. So the way things work, I think it's often down to a very sort of basic human need of how to make things functional. But again, here, what I'm personally interested in here again is to understand the cultural differences in where we work. In the first house we built in Austria, we learned that when you visit a home in Austria, which I've done many times, I'm also married to an Austrian, so I've been to many Austrian homes, you actually only make it to the kitchen. As a guest, you hardly ever make it to the living room. The living room is much smaller and behind the kitchen. And then you're sitting typically on a corner bench inside of the kitchen talking to the person cooking. And that's where the social life happens. That's kind of the public space in your house. That's a little bit different in Scandinavia. In Scandinavia, you do have an open kitchen that the guests are also coming into, but you're mostly sitting in the sofa in the living room, a little bit more comfortable. Or if you go to the Arab world, you see how people are sitting up against the wall on carpets or pillows. And then when you enter the room, you're actually in the middle of a circle. So you're quite welcome. There's this sort of gesture that you enter the middle of the circle as you enter the room. Where in Scandinavia, we sit around a table and the person who enters the room is actually outside of that circle. And I think all these things are related to functionality, but they are even more related to a cultural sort of differences that are extremely interesting to look at as a designer, I think. So when we build these houses, we also try very much to learn how do people actually interact in those rooms? How do you have guests in this room? How do you have a private life? How protected do you want to feel if you're home alone? We have sometimes made houses where you were quite exposed, lots of glass and lots of transparency. And then it turned out, but when you're home alone, you don't want it to be that way. So then we need to also be able to shut off the house a little bit more, so you feel more protected inside of it. So that's functionality, but it's also in many ways cultural sort of specific ideas about how to interact with a home, which I find extremely interesting to look at. And I find it a big privilege for us that we get to work in so many different cultural contexts, because then it's always this learning process, and it's like it's like a journey. You go to another culture and you figure out how it works there and accept the terms and try to design on that base.
Yeah, in other words, it's simply just becoming considerate of how people will use the place and about what the users need, right? Wanting to learn more about that is key to making a nice project.
Yeah.
Will you tell us more about the Glasshouse project and what did you try to accomplish through the design?
Yeah, the Glasshouse is our most recent project, they started using it this summer. It's fairly close to Berlin. It takes a little over an hour to drive up there, in a forest sort of landscape overlooking a valley. The process behind the house was quite funny, because in the beginning we had a flat roof planned, and with the purpose of letting the neighbors behind us keep their view over the landscape, and due to the fact that we actually wanted to build a fairly small house, for budget reasons also, and for the fact that we didn't need anything more than that. There was, it was intended that you would spend a lot of time outside when you're there. It's in a little village where all the neighbor houses have pitched roofs, but behind us there's also a concrete factory that has a big flat roof. So we try to tell a story of actually, building ourselves into a physical context, not only of the pitched roof houses, but also the factory in the nearby surroundings. But that didn't actually, they didn't accept that at the building authorities. They said, no, your context is the other houses, not the more dominant and much more physically present factory nearby. So they told us we have to reach a height of 7 meters. And we were already talking about how nice the roof, the view would be from the roof, and maybe we should make a terrace up there, so we could make like a green roof, and you could be on that green roof. We had all these dreams about sitting up there. And then in the end, the compromise became that we just put basically a greenhouse on top of the house, so that we could reach those 7 meters that came out of the mind of the person working with the building authorities, which is often how it works in Germany. So you have a dialogue. You can't necessarily very precisely read from the beginning on what you're allowed to and what you're allowed to. So you make a proposal, and then you discuss it, and then you get some obstructions or whatever, and then you you work after that. But with the Glasshouse, to be honest, I'm very happy about the outcome of it, because that room upstairs became a highlight in the house. I think it's a room that happened because we had to do it. It of course consumed more materials and other things, so it would have been more sustainable, you can say, without. But on the other hand, we couldn't get the building permission without, so we had to sort of inflate the house bigger so it would reach those magic 7 meters. But in this case, I'm extremely happy about it, actually, because that room upstairs that we made, which we tried to make without consuming too many materials, it's not a part of the insulated house. And it's still usable for something, so it's not complete nonsense. So we made it accessible, and then you can sit up there. It works like a greenhouse, basically. So it's not heated in the winter, and it's not artificially cooled down. So you have about, in the Northern European climate, you have about, I would say, 8 to 10 months a year where it's super nice to sit up there. In the summer, you would rather be in the garden. In the winter, you stay downstairs in the insulated part of the house. And there's a sort of a natural ventilation up there. It's open on the sides and stuff like that. So it's a really, really fun space, and definitely they use it a lot. And every time I talk with them, they are up there, and they are sitting there. We just had a very nice and mild autumn, so it's been a very, very nice first season for that type of space. They have absolutely amazing sunsets up there, because it's looking west over the valley, and you see a little bit more of the landscape when you're up on the first floor height. You can actually see down to a lake that you can't see from the ground floor. So they obviously spend a lot of time there. So it's a bit of an event for them to go up there in the late part of the day and see the sunset and sit up there. So we installed a bathtub there now, so they can sit in the bathtub and see the view. And then they change it a little bit from time to time. In the beginning they had a workspace up there, so they put up a big desk. They put a lot of pillows on the floor so they can lay there. So it's a rather undefined space, which is now both a bathroom and a workspace and a living room, which is I'm extremely interested in. I'm so excited to see how that develops over time. It's a little bit new for us, I think, that we build an undefined space. Most of the houses we have built are actually quite modest in size and scale and budget. So we had to be very, practical with every square meter that we did had a purpose somehow. And for the first time, we did just a vast space of step number one. It was nothing programmed, and I'm totally into that now. We have we have more of that in current projects coming. So yeah, I think the story of that house is in many ways a little bit of the sort of randomness of building laws in Germany, but I think in this case turned into something very positive and very inspiring, and something that I'm super interested in. So I hope we can make that twist in projects in the future, because it is a part of the reality for architects to work under these conditions of laws and other things. There's so many factors in what we do that we have to adapt to. And yeah, I think the success of a project is, of course, very much related to in which extent we are able to turn that into something operative and something positive.
Yeah, it must be really fulfilling to design something that the people enjoy and also extend the function of the space, right? Now it becomes another program to add as a hobby or as an activity. So it's really nice. Lastly, what is your take on architecture and its place and role in the world that we live in now?
That's a big question. I mean, we as architects famously, and that's being repeated, I think, in 9 out of 10 lectures that we do for each other and other interested people, the amount of material and energy consumption that the built environment is consuming is a responsibility that we, together with the lawmakers and the clients who finance architecture, is responsible for. So the material consumption is extremely important, of course, and how we heat the buildings. The situation in Europe changed a lot, obviously, in February in terms of delivery of energy, and the result of that we saw immediately in the projects we're doing. So everything we have started designing after February 22 needs to be off-grid somehow. That's the new thing. So we are working our way into that immediately. So everything we do always responds to immediate changes in society. When the pandemic came around, every new project had a home office, and every hotel had a co-work space, and that is you know, the mobility of work became an immediate reaction of something worldwide. And I think it's easy to adapt to these things, and it's something we take into consideration. And sometimes, you know, you also need, I wouldn't say need, but sometimes a catastrophe accelerates the tempo in which, for example, the lawmakers are also willing to open up for new things, which we, of course, embrace. I don't want to celebrate catastrophes in that sense, but on the other hand, to find something positive in all this, it is the tempo in which suddenly things can happen. And I'm very happy to see that. And I see now a quick acceleration in you know, the mindset of people in terms of sustainability and other things that we've actually been talking about for the last 20-30 years. But sometimes, you know, starting the whole society and the lawmakers and everything around is like starting an old locomotive. You know, it starts slow. So I think that was it.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much. My personal takeaway is to add personal touch and wanting to know more and be there in every project, that because you've been so hands-on with your project, so you learn more and can make meaningful additions to things that you leave open, like the Glasshouse project or other projects as well. So I think it can make very successful outcomes because of that. So thank you so much for inspiring us to do that.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for reaching out. It was very interesting talking to you.